The observation deck of the Meridian Star hummed with the low thrum of ion engines as Ambassador Susan Chen knelt on the polished floor, her hand extended toward 3 sets of razor-sharp teeth. Lucas Ward stood frozen in the doorway, his diplomatic briefcase hanging forgotten from his grip. "Susan, what in the—" "Shh," she whispered, not breaking eye contact with the smallest of the Vraken cubs. "You'll startle them." The Vraken were apex predators from a world where trust was earned through dominance displays and blood rituals. Their kind had never formed alliances, never cooperated with other species beyond temporary truces born of mutual benefit. They stood 8 feet tall when fully grown, with obsidian scales that could deflect plasma rounds and claws capable of shearing through reinforced steel. Their cubs, however, were only the size of large dogs, though no less deadly. The smallest cub, its scales still soft and iridescent, inched closer to Susan's outstretched hand. Its siblings watched from behind their mother, matriarch Kesival, whose 4 amber eyes narrowed with something between curiosity and barely restrained aggression. "Ambassador Chen," Kesival's voice rumbled through the translator embedded in her throat. "Remove your appendage. My offspring do not understand restraint. They will damage you." Susan smiled, keeping her hand perfectly still. "With respect, matriarch, they're learning, watch." The cub's snout touched her fingertips. Its nostrils flared, processing the scent of this strange, soft creature that had no scales, no claws, no natural weapons whatsoever. Then, as Lucas held his breath, the cub opened its mouth and gently, impossibly gently, closed its teeth around Susan's index finger. "She's insane," Lucas muttered to himself. 3 years as her attaché, and Susan still found ways to terrify him. The cub's teeth, each one a curved needle designed to pierce and tear, pressed against Susan's skin without breaking it. The young Vraken's eyes widened as if surprised by its own restraint. It held her finger for a long moment, then released it and chirped, a sound Lucas had never heard a Vraken make. "Impossible," Kesival breathed. Her scales rippled, a physiological response that the cultural database identified as profound shock. No prey species survives that test. The cub should have tasted blood and entered feeding frenzy. "Humans aren't prey," Susan said quietly, withdrawing her hand to reveal unmarked skin. "And we're not predators either. We're something you don't have a word for yet." The middle cub approached now, emboldened by its sibling's success. It butted its head against Susan's knee and she laughed, a warm, genuine sound that made all 3 cubs tilt their heads in unison. "We call it domestication," Lucas found himself explaining, stepping into the room despite every survival instinct screaming at him to run. 30,000 years ago, we took wolves, creatures that could kill us, and made them into companions. We've done it with hundreds of species. Predators, prey, everything in between. Kesival's tail lashed once, a sign of agitation. You subjugated them, made them slaves. "No," Susan corrected, now running her fingers over the middle cub's scales as it leaned into her touch. "We formed partnerships. Mutual trust. They protect us, we feed them. They hunt with us, we shelter them. It's not about dominance, it's about family." The largest cub finally approached, more cautious than its siblings. It circled Susan twice before sitting directly in front of her, matching her kneeling height. They regarded each other in silence. "In our history," Lucas continued, warming to the subject, "we humans were never the strongest, never the fastest, never the most naturally armed. We survived through cooperation, through building bonds with the unlikeliest allies. Your weakness became your strength," Kesival observed. "Our adaptability became our strength," Susan replied. She slowly raised both hands and placed them on either side of the large cub's head. Its eyes tracked the movement, but it didn't flinch. "We learned that trust isn't a weakness to exploit. It's a resource to cultivate." The cub leaned forward, pressing its forehead against Susan's. The gesture was so unexpected that Kesival made a sound no translator could process, something between a growl and a gasp. "That is the submission gesture," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "The cub acknowledges you as Pack Alpha." Susan smiled, her eyes glistening. "Or maybe just as friend." Lucas watched as all 3 cubs converged on Susan, chirping and pawing at her with a gentleness that belied their predatory nature. The smallest one actually rolled onto its back, exposing its vulnerable underbelly, the ultimate sign of trust among Rakankind. We've been observing your species for 6 cycles, Kesval said slowly, her scales shifting through colors Lucas had never seen in the cultural database. We deemed you too soft for alliance, too trusting. We believed you would be easy to conquer or at worst irrelevant. And now? Susan asked, now completely surrounded by contentedly chirping death machines. Now I understand why 17 other species have joined your federation. Kesval moved closer, her massive form casting shadows across the observation deck. You don't conquer. You don't demand submission. You simply befriend, and somehow, that is more powerful than any weapon. She extended one massive claw toward Susan. The human, still seated among the cubs, reached up and grasped it without hesitation. My people have a saying, Kesval continued. Trust is the first thing you kill or it kills you, but humans have a different saying, don't they? Lucas nodded, remembering the words carved above the Federation Council chambers. Trust is the first thing you build, or you build nothing. Impossible, Kesval repeated, but this time it sounded like wonder rather than disbelief. You let my cubs, trained since birth to see all other beings as prey or threat, chew on your hand. You showed no fear, offered no dominance display, and they responded not with instinct but with choice. Susan finally stood, 3 cubs immediately clustering around her legs. Because I trusted them to make that choice, matriarch. And trust, once given freely, tends to be returned. The Vrakan Dominion has never had allies, Kesval said formally. Only temporary contracts enforced by mutual fear. And? Lucas prompted, hardly daring to hope. The matriarch's scales settled into a deep, peaceful blue. And I think it's time we learned what humanity has known all along. That the strongest bonds aren't forged in fire and blood. They're built on impossible trust. The smallest cub chose that moment to climb into Susan's arms, curling against her chest with a contented purr. She cradled it like a human infant, this creature that could have torn out her throat and smiled up at its mother. Welcome to the Federation, matriarch. We're going to be great friends. Outside the observation deck, stars wheeled past as the Meridian Star continued its journey. Inside, history rewrote itself in the space between trust given and trust returned. In the impossible gentleness of a predator's cub chewing carefully on a human's hand, and finding not prey but family. ND.